Right, so quite a comprehensive summary of what's going on. As I was saying, I'll start with you, Giorgi. Let's start with some definitions, because we need to understand what things mean before we can start talking about them. How would you define radical right?
Yeah, it's a very important question because we have to describe them as totally different groups. First group is a far-right groups, and they are not anti-EU or anti-NATO alliance, but they believe that European Union contains some kind of problems itself. But they are a solution, they are itself as a solution, not a problem. Right, so they believe that they have to protect European Union from this migration, which pushed forward by Russia, especially since 2014. And it's important to say that they believe that European Union and European societies have already achieved some significant, tangible human rights, the rights from freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of thinking, and so on and so forth. But they believe that this huge amount of migrants from the Middle Eastern countries can't become European so swiftly. Therefore, their integration is very slow, and that means that they can create some kind of state within the state, or politics within the politics, and cultural politics within the states. This will create some kind of problems. So they believe that Europe should protect itself, and they are not very strong anti-European Union or anti-NATO or anti-US and so on and so forth. But when it comes to hardliners, this is a totally different group with much more obscure, and their objectives are blurry, and they also tend to hate NATO, hate United States, hate European Union, and they trying to show that the Russia, the East, is some kind of morally higher being, supreme being. Therefore, they tend to be pro-Russian. And they already several times mentioned that it is like Russia who has the right to give example of the European states, which is some kind of funny because Russia doing is totally vice versa, and Russia pushing forward of this migration and crisis, which exists into the European doorstep since 2015. When Russian planes bombed the migrant camps into the northern Syria, and then 2021, Russia invited huge swaths of migrants into the Russian soil, and then push forward into the western borders of Belarus, which is tend to be Poland. So right now it's also a migrant crisis into the doorsteps of Finland, which is also made by Russia. So it's kind of hypocrisy when it comes to hardliners, because hardliners tend to hate United States and tend to like Russia, but it is Russia who push forward this crisis, and it is Russia who creates this kind of crisis. And
Understood.
also, I want to mention that compared to the softliners, they believe that European Union should become crumbled or become softer, and not become like one stronger entity, which favors most of Western current governments right now.
We see almost the opposite of that being reflected in the European Parliament, in addition to which the right doesn't seem to suffer from the same fragmentation that Vladimir has just pointed out applies to the left. Why is that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. But first of all, I want to mention one important thing, that in the political theory, especially when it comes to political ideologies, there is a popular way to show political ideologies and their own rhetoric. For example, far left and far right in the political spectrum is often very, very near to one each other. If you portray them in the horseshoe principle, which means that the farthest points of this horseshoe is very near to one each other. So therefore, their rhetoric and their speech, their attitudes is almost the same. But but Vladimir mentioned very, very interesting point that far left is not that far, it's not that radical itself. When it comes to far right always find the enemy. Always find the enemy when it comes to nationalism, when it comes to civilization, when it comes to culture, when it comes to politics, when it comes to economic, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to far left, most of the time far left mention economical problems. But it is also a very interesting point that nowadays, into the European politics, often people tend to resemble far-right as a communist international, also known as Comintern, which existed into the early 1930s. And I want to explain you why. It's a very, very odd thing to even resemble that kind of thing. But during the 1930s, Communist International, also known as Comintern, always tried to show that and emphasize their own identity, that they trying to protect themselves from oppression, and they always try to revolutionize society and try to look. We are the solution. We are the messianic figures. We want to change the whole history, and this same narrative still exists. So this is very strange thing because it was almost 100 years since Communist International stop existing, not 80 years actually, but this after 80 years it's still popular how these extremist groups, extremist right-wingers or extremist left-wingers trying to show their ideas, and their ideas often chain to the idea of their own foreign policy, which always anti-Western itself. It's
right.
like a suicidal, and they want to find the solution into the East, into the Russia, and it's very strange, but it's the same as it was in 1930s.
So the younger generation is liable to be disappointed by their shift to the right, but it sounds, Giorgi, as though it's not the protecting the borders message, rather the economic message that they are counting on. Would you agree, or is there a concern amongst the youngsters too that there is a loss or there's a uncontrolled illegal migration into Europe?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, but I also mention the means how far-right groups, how right operate. They are using modern technology. Them using modern technology as almost no other parties, no other movements can. They are using internet very well. They are using social networks very well. They are using very simple wording. They are using very simple messaging, a simple message box, and that message box is working right now. And also they are using so-called conspiracy theories. And that conspiracy theories, and most of them are very funny, and you can make a joke from that. But this kind of words, this kind of message box is working when it comes to inexperienced youngsters who right now trying to find some kind of new identity. And this searching of new identity in youngsters, young Europeans, is real crucial right now issue into the European politics,